Thank you very much. The next order is the motion on the order paper, which is on the name of the Chief Whip of the Opposition, Honorable Steenhuisen.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. The ancient Greek titan Prometheus is legend to have said, and I quote, "Whom the gods seek to destroy, they first make mad," unquote. And what madness we have witnessed in this House. A president who sold his country to foreigners, who stripped the country not only of its money and resources, but who have snatched away opportunity from the desperate hands of the poor and most vulnerable in our society. The mother whose sheer desperation forces her to feed her children every night on grass and sugar water. This is madness. All the while, the president and his family have gotten richer, obscenely richer. The President of the Republic has sacrificed the future of our nation's children on the altar of the Guptas only to selfishly secure his own future. This is madness. And our economy has been pushed to breaking point. Thievery by day, maneuvering by night. Finance ministers pushed out under the cover of darkness. Their high crimes and misdemeanors, trying to put the economy and the people of South Africa first, and to keep the rabid wolves of state capture away from the doors of the people's treasury. This is madness. A Minister of Finance with no plan whatsoever to rescue our free-falling economy, other than to slavishly execute, like some beaming Lord Baelish, the orders of his mad king. The irresponsible uncle that we all know, who bets the family home to buy a sports car he knows he cannot afford. Risking it all, he wants to take the sound investment portfolio and throw it into the abyss of SAA. This is madness. 9.3 million of our mothers, brothers, sisters, and fathers who do not have the dignity of work because this government cannot get the basics right, and they have a parliament that does nothing to help them. This is madness. Those who stand up for right and against wrong are pursued and persecuted, while the crooked and corrupt are promoted. This is madness. And where exactly were the guardians of the people when these mists of madness swept across our land? This parliament should be the front line of defense for the people of South Africa. Instead, at every twist, test, and turn, it has chosen president over people, party over principle, executive over example, and collusion over constitution. We saw it happen with Nkandla. We saw it happen when the Constitutional Court made their damning judgment. We saw it when ministers like Faith Mutambi, Batabile Dlamini, and Mosebenzini Dwazwane wreaked havoc on the nation, while this House sat on its hands and looked the other way. That is madness. And we saw it happen when more than 100 vulnerable patients were sentenced to die an agonizing death by a government that behaved with criminal neglect and inhumane indifference. And we are watching it happen before our very eyes over state capture. And on the 8th of August, South Africans came to see the truth. That we don't have a Jacob Zuma problem, we have an ANC problem. On the back of Nkandla, the State of Capture report, the 783 charges of fraud, corruption, and racketeering, despite his picking off of good men and women in your own party, one by one, despite his driving away of excellence and inducting incompetence, you, apart from a few brave women and men on your benches who saw madness and tried to stop it, chose instead to own him. The ANC had an opportunity to do right by the people and our Constitution and to stop the madness. But now you have become it. Mr. Jacob Zuma is the ANC, and the ANC is Mr. Jacob Zuma. Same WhatsApp group. And hear this. As surely as night follows day, this madness will contaminate your party until it destroys you. It's already started. As comrade turns on comrade, your factional battles in some provinces like KwaZulu-Natal are literally becoming a matter of life and death. And all the while, as these battles of your party rage on, the people are forgotten. We've also seen the manifestations of it being played out here in our parliament, as the people's business is put on hold and forgotten while your factional battles play out in your caucus and our committee rooms, paralyzing the ability of this House to fulfill even its most basic constitutional mandates. Passing legislation, fail. This year will be one of the lowest outputs of legislation this Parliament has ever seen. We've just not sat enough this year to process the people's business because you've put your party business and factional battles, and those have taken centre stage. Long recess periods for your organisation to try to sort out its internal battles. Committee meetings cancelled because ANC members cannot stand to be in the same room as each other. We've seen them tearing each other apart. Home Affairs Committee, Public Enterprises Committee, Public Service and Administration Committee, like some mad beast that flails at its own flesh and gnaws away its own limbs, and all the while the people are forgotten. This House has been completely castrated in its ability to hold the executive accountable by a governing party unwilling to hold its own executive accountable, and a presidium that refuses to give this House the ability to do its job. Just last week, at this very podium, the President was allowed, once again, to get away without answering basic questions that were put to him. It isn't that there wasn't an answer to dislike it. It was that there was no answer at all. How is that holding the President to account? If serious question time is now reduced to a giggling, paper-shuffling evasion session, how can the National Assembly say that it's doing its job? And yet, the truth is, as Sophocles said, and I quote, "What joy is there in day that follows day, some swift, some slow, with death the only goal," unquote. And yet that is the living reality for so many of our forgotten citizens under this government. The mother in abject poverty in Mount Aleph, the young school leaver in Kimberley who has given up hope of finding a job and whose only escape from this is tick. These citizens and millions like them should be this government's obsession, but they are not. They should be this Parliament's obsession, but they are not. And that is why we need a reset. We can't afford another 2 years of this government. We cannot tolerate another 2 years of the Gupta family's toxic influence over President Zuma. South Africa deserves a fresh start. And the Constitution at Section 50 makes provision for early elections in instances such as these where there is a legitimacy crisis. Public representatives are elected to represent the hopes and aspirations of ordinary South Africans across the country who, through their votes, choose them to serve. When they no longer serve those who elected them, but instead the interests of a political elite and their criminal associates, they must be removed. And so it's very clear that the ANC can no longer be trusted. And the big question we have to ask is, why is the ANC so scared of giving the people, who should matter the most in a democracy, the power to have passed judgment over them and their president? It's because they cannot be trusted. They've seen the polls, they know what's happening, and they know that more than anybody, it's time to usher in new elections so that we can get a new start for South Africa. I urge you to support our motion.
Honorable Mtagana.
The biggest blunder committed by the DA of this motion. And actually, I think you and Honorable Moiman should resign because you actually misled your party. And I didn't say so. You said so. Here's your statement that said so. So South Africans will never be fooled by the Democratic Alliance. I thank you, Chair.
Next speaker is the Honourable Steenhuisen.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. Well, we asked to deal with rationality by the Honourable Mdekane, but what we saw in return was complete irrationality. Since when is too much democracy a bad thing? I don't understand this. He says we were driven by a desire to grab power undemocratically. Since when is an election using a constitutional motion undemocratic? The truth of the matter is, this side of the House is terrified of an early election. Absolutely terrified. And they talk about us having to do some praying. Let me tell you something, that anybody who's in the business of knee pads would make a fortune with all the praying that's going on these benches, because they know they're not coming back at the next election, and those of you that do will be sitting on this side of the House. The cost of the election. Let me tell you, that the cost of another 2 years of the Zuma administration will far outstrip the cost of any election. And we'll do a tally on that going forward and keep this House updated. The IEC. Well, you want to give the IEC another 2 years to see how much further they can deploy cadres and how much more rigging can be done. I have a confession to make. A confession. This was not an original motion. Not an original motion at all.
Honorable Steenhuisen, will you take a seat, please?
Can a member take a question?
Why are you rising, Honorable Member?
I'm rising to check if a member is ready to take.
Honorable Steenhuisen, can you take a question?
Don't take questions from councillors.
The member is not prepared to take
Who
a
gave you
question.
permission
Please take
to-
your seat. Continue, Honorable
On a
Steenhuisen.
point of order, Chair.
What is the point order?
The chief whip of the opposition has just referred to the member of this parliament as a councillor. I don't think that it is parliamentary.
Honorable order. Order.
Rule 84.
Order, honourable members. Honourable Steenhuisen, let us refer to each other in an honourable way. All members here are members of parliament. There's no councillors here.
I thought she does counselling for the caucus. They need it. To say that this wasn't an original motion. In fact, in November last year and February this year, the leader of the EFF, Mr. Julius Malema, called for early elections. They were not possible at that time constitutionally. The same with the UDM's leader, Mr. Barntolomisa, called for Parliament to be dissolved and early elections. It's not a new idea. But my fellow members of the 5th Parliament, let us remember that this day, the 5th of September 2017, was a day that this House had an opportunity to strike out and draw a line and stop the madness. But it's done what it's done for the last 2 years. Stand up, fold its hands, and turn its back on the people of South Africa. But know this, the people will bring change, and as that great spiritual hymn said, we are not afraid and we shall overcome. Thank you.
Order, honourable members.